Now? Yep.
Yeah. Maybe I should have purchased more like tickets or something.
You had a good night?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Thuy helps us every Friday on our stall on Smith Street. She's Vietnamese background, and because a lot of Vietnamese live around here, so she's talking to Vietnamese about the issues that we're campaigning on. So
I've been following Steve after having seen him doing some couples of issues with the lower class and small members' families. He has been very attentive and very helpful to those.
I think Steve is the best with all the work that he does for the locals and everything. I think he deserves to be re-elected this year. Go, Steve.
You're a local resident?
Yes, I am. I'm from Collingwood.
But there's a few other things that we're celebrating tonight. One is the campaign work that we've been doing over the recent period and are planning to continue on with this year. And so Aish is going to talk about our No Room for Racism campaign, which has been the focus of our campaign work. And then after that, our local councillor, Stephen Jolly, is going to be talking about the important stuff we've got planned for the rest of this year, later this year, with the council election coming up in October. But before I invite Aish up, I just wanted to also announce that one thing that we're celebrating tonight is the launch of our new magazine. It's called The Socialists. We launched it online this week, so it's available for people to read on our website, socialist.net.au. But it's really important for us to continue to bring out that publication, that people are generous and buy a subscription to it. I think that there's never been a more important time to bring out a publication that is expressing socialist views and alternative views, considering the political climate that we're in Australia at the moment. For one thing, we're in the middle of a federal election campaign, and really nobody seems to care too much that's going on. And I don't think that people are to blame for that. I think the reality is that people know that there's nobody out there that's really worth their vote and worth their support. And so really what we're about and what we're trying to do is build grassroots movements from below with a totally different perspective on the type of society that we should be living in and that we should be fighting for. And that's what we're trying to do with all of the projects that we're involved in, including publishing the Socialist magazine.
Thank you everyone for coming and for all your support. With the No Room for Racism campaign, it was launched last year in February, and one of the main goals, the very first goal for that was to fight against the far right and against Reclaim Australia that was spouting these racist ideas against Muslims, against refugees, and they tried to bring their ideas out onto the streets. And so far we've had a very good sort of impact where they don't feel confident anymore to come out blatantly on the streets of Melbourne and spread their racist ideas. But now, of course, the situation is slightly changing. What we can see now is the situation with refugees is much worse than it was 10 years ago, where we're seeing cases of sexual assault against women and children and men in detention centers where rape victims can't get an abortion. These are refugee women. But also we can see that the Aboriginal community, which has been consistently having their land taken away from them, has seen now the foreclosures of their communities so that corporations can take up the space in their lands. And also with the Muslim community, which has faced scrutiny and violence, especially Muslim women in public transport and public spaces, we can see that the racism has sort of increased through that. And with the upcoming election campaign, we've seen both the major parties trying to outdo each other on who can be more cruel to refugees so that they can try and get votes and try and get electoral support from that. Our campaign has consistently said that racism is a way for the government and for the establishment to sort of scapegoat minorities and distract them from the real problems that people face. The real problems like job insecurity, the fact that people may not be able to pay their rent or support their children, support their families. These are the real problems that people are faced with and people are scared about, and the government is using racism as a tool to sort of distract them away from that. And of course, recently we've seen Peter Dutton come out and blatantly say that himself in a very crude and quite stupid way. But as much as he's gotten a lot of backlash against this, and that's very, a good thing to see, for some of the most vulnerable communities in Australia where job opportunities are scarce, where resources and social services are scarce, these are kind of ideas can actually gain traction in those areas because they're not being presented with any other alternative to fight against these kind of ideas. So the point of this campaign is to give people that kind of alternative where you have every right to be angry about your economic situation, about the uncertainty that you face, but your anger is directed at the wrong source, the source which is the most vulnerable people in society. The real source are the government that enacts these racist policies, the corporations that don't pay taxes and evade taxes and sometimes gets tax rebates. So we as this campaign want to provide that alternative to people where we're putting forward the idea that we're fighting against racism and against any type of racism, but also we're fighting for people who are defending their standard of living. So we're putting both those charges forward, where we want to defend fight against racism, but also fight against the attacks on our living standards by the government.
Thank you. But I can't tell you how many people over the last few months have asked me desperately, is Steve Jolly going to stand in the election? Is Steve Jolly going to stand in the election? I need to have someone to vote for. And so Steve's going to come up and tell us a little bit more about what we plan for that election, but most importantly, what type of organisation we're going to be building and what kind of community support we plan on building in the coming months to make that possible. So please make Steve feel welcome.
Well, as Mel said, thanks everybody for coming, and also I want to thank all this amazing staff here at Kent Street. Tim. But what we've really noticed, and it's been a very, very pleasant surprise, was we've been inundated with support by every measurable quantitative measure: money, support, emails, people turning up to our meetings. We've never had more support because people are looking for an alternative, but they want an alternative that they can trust. And that means that much quicker than we expected, as Mel said, we've been able to bring out our first magazine. And I do actually believe, in all modesty, if you look at it online and the hard copy next week, not only is it the most attractive looking full colour magazine that exists on the left in Australia today, but also more importantly, the content is absolutely sharp and to the point and relevant to today's world. And I encourage everybody, as Mel said, to take out a subscription, see Sue at the end, and do the business and help us financially as well. And the reason that socialist ideas are gaining traction, and radical ideas generally, not only here, but especially, who would have believed it, but the United States of America and places like that, with the Sanders campaign, which has inspired so many young people in Australia today, it's not just because somebody's just started reading Karl Marx books or whatever. It's because capitalism is not working for young people. We've seen the existentialist climate change that's existing right now thanks to the irresponsibility of the people who run this planet right now. On Friday, yesterday, NASA, which is hardly a left-wing organisation, brought out images, photographs that show, even to the most brain-dead denier of climate change, the climate change that exists in the North Pole, in Antarctica, and right throughout the world. We see organisations like Oxfam, again, not exactly a radical organisation, explaining at the start of this year that 62 people control half the wealth of the world. This is the type of social inequality that Karl Marx wouldn't have even dreamt about. It's worse actually than in the times of the 1800s and the and last century. And what that means in places like Australia is the mismanagement of the system that we live under is that for every one homeless person that lives here in Melbourne on the streets, there are 3 empty apartments in Melbourne right now. This is the type of thing that is an indictment of the system that we live under at the present moment in time. And that's why more and more young people are coming to the conclusion that they're being sold a pup. You can go to university, you can do all the right things. You study hard, you get your VCE, you go to university, you get a degree, and what happens? You're stuck with a debt around your neck for the rest of your life. You're flipping burgers or making cappuccinos or working in bars for the rest of your life, in casual job, in part-time job, on desperately low wages, sometimes without superannuation, with no sick pay, with no holiday pay. This is the reality of the future for young people in this country, with massively high rents, no chance of buying a house, if we let this system continue as it is and don't fight for change. And that's why, as the Americans are more and more saying, we have to say in Australia, we need a political revolution here in Australia, and we need an economic revolution in Australia. We need to build the ideas of democratic socialism, and that's what we intend to do over the course of the next period. Now, the last point I want to make is that you can have all the great ideas and all the great magazines and all the great policy and program and even the great strategy and tactics, but it means absolutely nothing if the rubber doesn't hit the road, if you don't organise and mobilise. Because everything that's happened in this century and last century that's been good has come from grassroots action. It was the black people on the ground that overthrew apartheid in 1994 in South Africa. It was women suffragettes, many of whom were socialists, who led the struggle for women's emancipation at the start of the last century. It's grassroots activism that's key. And that is why our defence of the Socialist Council position that we won in the city of Yarra 12 years ago is very, very important. Because using that position with the local community, which has always had a history in this area of militancy, of struggle, of fighting back, we've been able to do lots of very, very good things. We've been able to work with the local community to stop the East-West tunnel. This was a road that would have wasted billions of dollars of taxpayers' money. It wouldn't have worked, and it would have led to demolition of dozens of working class homes in this area. We were part of that struggle, and the socialist position on council was crucial to winning that victory over the course of the last 2 or 3 years. We have worked with our public housing tenants, the 15% of people in this area who aren't loaded, who live on the 3 massive big public housing estates and the walk-up estates as well in North Fitzroy and elsewhere, who often are living off the bones of their arse, who don't have any money, who don't live in the same way as the people who are partying here tonight live. We have worked with public housing tenants over the last 12 years, thanks to that council position, thanks to organising with public housing tenants, to stop Labour and Liberal governments from flogging off the open space in those estates. That wouldn't have happened if we hadn't got that socialist position on the council, and that's something that we intend to continue over the next period. We worked with the local community in Abbotsford, with Collingwood Football Club, to refurbish Victoria Park, one of the best open spaces and assets in this community, which was a result of the mobilisation of the local community to force the federal government of the day, Collingwood Football Club and council, to build what is now a park, a dog area, and one of the most magnificent sports stadiums open to the public. That wouldn't have happened if we hadn't got that position on the council. We've also worked really, really closely with people against the richest people in this area, which are the developers. We live on a gold mine. We live on an area where the land value is higher than it's ever been. Developers are coming in, buying land, and sticking up and squeezing in like sardines as many people as they can to maximise their profit rate. And the government that they pay for, because they bankroll the Liberal Party, they bankroll the Labour Party, these developers, refuses to build the services for these new future residents. And that's why we don't have enough libraries. That's why we don't have enough public transport, schools, childcare. We have worked with the local community on countless development battles to force the developers to the negotiating table and to get back more from the developers than they otherwise would have given. And that's a credit to the local community, and that's another reason why we must maintain our position on the council. But the other thing is there's 1,001 tiny little issues that might seem a little bit boring to some of those academic socialists on the fringes of our movement, but are absolutely crucial to working class people that we deal with every day. Something like the fact that council won't put nets on the basketball courts in our public parks. The fact that parking is such a war every single day, where council are just trying to screw local people, fines after fines after fines, going up year after year, well over the rate of inflation. where council banned young people from using Edinburgh Gardens on New Year's Eve, spending $250,000 on security against their own people, our children, to stop Edinburgh Gardens being used as a peaceful open space on New Year's Eve. These, relatively minor issues are the bread and butter of what we do on the council. And they are the reasons why it's really important that this toehold that we have won for socialism and for the local community on the council is defended in October 22 and October 22 later in the year. And also, by the way, on housing, the support that we've given recently to the very brave occupiers down in Bendigo Street that are saying that those empty houses should be put up and kept in public housing for working class families and not sold off to the real estate agents and to the developers. But we've got two problems. One is gentrification. More and more people are coming in here with big, loaded people who aren't necessarily know what we stand for and aren't necessarily of the left. Wealthy people have moved in to all the new units that have come in, and that's not going to work in our favour at election time. The second problem we've got is the developers themselves. The developers are dripping with dollars at the present moment in time, and you can bet your bottom dollar every big developer in town will be bankrolling anyone who stands against me or any of the other socialist candidates on October 22. That is a matter of fact, and we wear that, by the way, as a badge of honour. And therefore, what we want from you is very simple. First of all, we want your money. I make no apologies about that. We do not get money from big business, from developers, or from the government. We can only survive by money from ordinary people like you. So if it's $2 from somebody who's a high school student, who's a single mum, somebody who's unemployed, that's gold for us. If you're in a position to give us $2,000 to pay for our next election leaflet, or even $1,000, or even $100, that is gold for us, and we desperately make an appeal, and I make no apologies about asking you for your money. If you can't give it tonight, then in the period ahead. The other thing that we want you to do when you leave tonight is sign up for the election campaign. Even if that just means letterboxing your street and helping us with the 1,000,001 tasks it's going to take to get us over the line on October 22. But if you want to get involved in a more active way, like many of the people in this room already are, sign up on that too. Because life is short. And this is a very, very exciting world that we're living in right now. More and more people are turning away from the establishment parties. Yes, some to the right, but also some to the left. We want you to be part of the movement for social change. You can't do it on your own. You've got to be in a collective. You've got to be organised. We want you to work with us. We are not the fountain of all wisdom. We want you to come in with your talents and your experience and your ideas in a democratic organisation to help us build a movement similar to what Sanders has got in America at the present moment in time. That's what we're trying to do in the next period. We want you to subscribe to the magazine, help with the election campaign, get involved with us. Thanks for coming. And don't get too pissed tonight because there's lots of police out on the road. Thanks very much.
I just want to remind everybody of what it is that you're helping us do. So first and foremost, this week we've launched our new publication. It's called The Socialist. You can currently read it online, but we really want to encourage people to take out a subscription. It's a much needed working class alternative to the absolute nonsense that gets published in the mainstream media and the Murdoch press. So please support us in bringing out that publication. Number two is our campaign work. Predominantly at the moment that means anti-racism work. That very much means what we've been doing is physically trying to stop neo-Nazis from marching on the streets. It's very important work. These people from the far right are trying to tap into the same anger and frustration that are drawing people to socialist ideas. Well, they're also being drawn to some of the most horrible, horrific and dangerous ideas out there as well on the far right. Thanks for everyone for coming. As I said before, I think it's really great that the bartender won the raffle because he's been so generous to us all now. Thanks so much to Pet Street, the whole crew for allowing us to use this space.